this title, called Control, carries a lot of inspiration from some older classics like Psyops, which was a favorite of mine, and Second Sight, which was very, very similar in terms of it, which basically, these are games that gave your character a massive amount of options in how they traverse the environment as well as how you approach combat. You can move things with your mind, but you could also just fly around things if you wanted to. You could pick up an object and use it as a shield against an advancing enemy, or you could choose to control their mind, make them fight alongside you. With so many options on how to attack each of the game scenarios, you could be forgiven for wanting to walk away from the screen just wishing you had maybe just one of these incredible abilities.
Now, to be fair, the character Jessie is trying to get to the bottom of a massive conspiracy with global implications if she fails, and most of the drama in our lives has significantly lower stakes.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you define by lower stakes. Now, I personally feel like turning off Coco Melon was also ending a massive global conspiracy, but maybe that's just me. But to be honest, my use of her skills wouldn't be quite as altruistic. I'm probably much more likely to use telekinesis to, bring a bowl of Frosted Flakes over here rather than protect the planet from supernatural attacks.
Frosted Flakes, man. Let me tell you.
Delicious.
Always the Frosted Flakes. But I mean, I know what you mean. I get it. I know what you mean.
Call me
the truth
Kellogg's.
is,
Give me money.
Stop. We ain't getting money for that one. But the truth is that as a believer in Christ, I have been promised some fairly substantial things, and yet I don't always see those materialize either.
Well, I remember quoting a Bible verse when I was young about having the faith to move mountains, and that if I just asked anything in Jesus' name, it would be done. But time and time again, I would find that the mountains that I tried to move so many times didn't seem to bulge at all. And as I got older, I found that many of my prayers would not get answered in the manner or the immediacy that I desired. And in those moments, I began to wonder why Jesus would even tell us that we could move mountains if it was an empty promise. And as a young believer, I had mental images similar to these concepts from Control, as I would read Bible stories about Peter walking on water, or finding enough money in the mouth of a fish that he caught to pay his taxes. Now, that's a miracle I wouldn't mind seeing.
You
somewhere,
want to get eaten by fish?
No, just I want to get the money.
Okay.
And I wouldn't mind seeing that miracle around April 15th would be great if we could get that. That'd be fantastic.
Nice.
But as both the literal and the figurative mountains in my life seemed to be quite content with remaining in place, I started to wonder if maybe I was doing it all wrong.
I get it. I mean, sometimes the people I prayed for would still die. And sometimes the situations in my life didn't improve. And sometimes they even got worse. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes. There's there for many of them.
So it's time for some answers. Let's start with the time Jesus ran into a fig tree without fruit, and then he killed it. Yeah, that happened. So, plant lovers, please avert your eyes.
Yes, you're not going to like this part. But in Matthew 21:18 through 22, Jesus was returning to the city. He was hungry. He saw a fig tree by the side of the road. He came to it. He found that there was nothing on it but leaves. And he said to that tree, "Let no fruit grow on you ever again." And immediately the fig tree withered away. I mean, well, what would you do if Jesus just told you just die? So it withered away. When the disciples saw it, they marveled. And they said, "How did the fig tree wither away so soon?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree," here it comes, "but also if you say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, it will be done. And whatever things you ask in prayer, believing, you will receive." Now that seems easy enough. Have faith, don't doubt, throw a mountain into the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, I like nice, simple 3-step programs. So why don't we see mountains just, flying in the ocean all day long? I mean, it's right there in the Bible. And to use maybe a slightly less over-the-top visual, why don't we see answers to prayer as frequently and as gloriously as Jesus just demonstrated with his fig tree? Yes, tossing large rocks sounds like a lot of fun and a good way to spend a Saturday, but I'm more interested in maybe putting some of the broken things in my life back together, as well as in the lives of the others that I care about. And to better understand the forces at work here, we're going to jump to another selection of verses that may shed some light on these mountainous dilemmas.
In Acts chapter 7 through 9, we find the introduction of Saul, a radical Pharisee who was responsible for persecuting the early church simply for believing in Jesus. As we see in these verses, he was clearly public enemy number one for the believers at the time, as he would perform home invasions and physically drag off Christians to prison for punishment and sometimes worse.
You see that in a couple of these selections. So in Acts 8:3, it says, "As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house, dragging off men and women, committing them to prison." And then later in Acts 9:1-2, it says, "Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, he went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues of Damascus, so that if he found any who were of the way," which was another word for being a Christian, "whether men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem." So at the time, Saul was becoming very well known for his persecution of the church, and it would be safe to assume that a lot of the prayers that were going up at that time were probably not for Saul's health and well-being. I mean, if you and I lived at that time, I mean, what would you have been praying for?
Right.
Not for Saul to live a long, healthy life.
No.
If I'm being truly honest with myself, after enough of my friends and family had been arrested, maybe put to death by this man's war on Christianity, I would probably have been praying for nothing short of his demise. I would have wanted, if we're going to move mountains, I would have wanted a mountain picked up and dropped right on his head. And now maybe that's a little extreme for you, so let's probe a little bit deeper. What person or situation have you begged and pleaded for God to remove from your life or the lives of others? What physical or financial or personal challenge have you been unable to overcome and you're just done with it? If this past year has shown us anything, it's that we are all closer to our breaking point than any of us probably ever imagined. So why can't that horrible, painful, pointless mountain just go anywhere but here?
The truth about mountains is that they serve multiple purposes that aren't always immediately obvious to the casual viewer. They provide a majority of the fresh water that the world consumes. A large amount of critical foods originated from mountains and mountain climates. Many species of animals live exclusively on mountains.
Delicious animals.
I'm sure you would think that they are. And their placement has a massive impact on the climate of the areas they surround. Suffice to say, they are not something one should move without truly considering the ramifications of their movement first. But if we as humans had our way, we would move them as soon as they pose even the most minor inconvenience, without any perspective as to what we had damaged in the process.
Saul represented a mountain that I'm sure a lot of early church members would have gladly preferred to have thrown into the ocean.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, later on he does get thrown into the ocean a couple times in some shipwrecks. Maybe it was just a delayed response on some of those prayers. But we tend, as a species, that when something doesn't immediately meet our expectations or serve our desired purposes, we have that exact same response. But if God had listened to those prayers, and if he had destroyed Saul the way many probably wanted him to, he would have thrown away a mountain that was responsible for growing the church for the next 2,000 years through his missionary work and his biblical writings. After Saul's conversion to Christianity in Acts chapter 9, this violent enemy of the cross became its fiercest advocate for Christ and believers around the world for the rest of his days, and eventually he gave his life for that.
I know that it may seem unlikely in your current circumstance, but consider that perhaps your current enemy, the person or situation who you are certain is here to destroy you and all you hold dear, what if they are actually your future champion? What if that which oppresses you now is actually going to be interceding for you the way that the Apostle Paul did for the believers after his conversion? In all the mysterious ways that the Lord works, nobody would have expected Saul to turn out to be the hero of the story, but yet, here we are.
In Acts chapter 9, verses 13-15, we see Ananias, and he's talking to God about Saul. And he says, "Lord, I've heard many things about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints. And now he's here for the authority to bind, and they throw in prison all who call on your name." And the Lord said to him, "Go, heal him." Ananias was going to go heal Saul of the blindness that he had been inflicted with. It said, he is a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. So that makes it become clear. Jesus told us to pray for our enemies, especially those who persecute us. Now I think I understand why. Those who persecute us and the situations that make life so challenging, those are not the mountains he was talking about moving. The mountains we're meant to move are inside our enemy and within our situation. We're not to pray for their removal or destruction, but for their deliverance and alignment with God's plan. Consider this possibility as we wrap up. Sure, this current mountain that we may be battling with, it may seem like a murderous, threatening Saul bent on our destruction. But the reason sometimes that God won't simply answer our prayer to throw that mountain into the ocean is because this mountain had a purpose. It just wasn't apparent until the sun hit it just right.
If he isn't moving that mountain in accordance with your prayers, then perhaps the placement of that mountain is the answer to your prayers. Just as Saul didn't look like an answer to prayer until after his conversion, your mountain may seem like it serves no purpose other than pain and inconvenience for you. As we will see in the next week's video, there is more than one reason why our mountain doesn't move.
Sometimes, as we saw with Saul, it is because it is not the mountain that needs moving. If your mountain is not moving, stop praying against your mountain and start praying for it. Perhaps that mountain that seems bent on destroying you is your future mountaintop experience. As we see so often in the video game Control, that enemy that you're facing may end up being your future ally and assisting you on your path forward.